Today I'm coming to you live from somewhere where it's snowing and it should not be, according to my personal opinions. How are you doing, Brian?
I am doing good. It is not snowing here, although it is a lot colder than I think it should be, according to my personal opinions, and also just historically, it's very cold here for some reason. But that's okay. That's okay. It is all warm on board the Ebon Hawk, and that is where we are today, as we are picking up our next couple of companions for our KOTOR 2 journey. So get the heater fired up, Atten, because we're coming on board with a couple more crewmates.
Yeah. I wonder if there technically even is room for all of these people. Like, where do they sleep? But maybe that's a discussion for another day. Um,
That's right. Yeah, you have to sleep in shifts on board the Ebon Hawk, I think.
yeah. So the last two companions from KOTOR 2 we spoke of were Michael the Disciple and Brianna the Handmaiden. And the funny thing is, in the game, they actually never really interact. And these two characters we're going to be discussing, Mira and Hanharr, they do interact, but technically, canonically, only one joins your crew.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, last week we talked about the disciple and the handmaiden, and they come on your join up on the Ebon Hawk, depending on if you're a male or a female exile. But Hanhar and Mira are going to decide to come on whether you are playing a light side or a dark side playthrough of the game. So depending on how you're doing, how nice you've been to people, that's going to determine who comes on board. So you're only going to get one of these stories depending on how you're playing the game.
Yeah, Mira, it is actually like if you're a neutral or light side, and then Hanhar's dark side, and uh, Mira can turn in. It has force potential, so a lot of people just would like, even if they were doing a dark side playthrough, go to Narshada first, and just be neutral, so they
Mm.
could get Mira and then turn her to the dark side later.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense if you want to go through her story. And I think of the two, I think she's a little bit more interesting. So now that we've got Mira and Hanhar on board, I think we start with Mira. Let's talk about her story first.
Okay. Uh, yeah. So Mira, what I remember is she has red hair, it's shorter, she's sassy, she's a bounty hunter, and they put her in that outfit. So, what do you remember?
They put her in that outfit. Apparently, it is disarming to her potential bounties, and she uses that to her advantage, which I think is kind of a cringy reason for doing things. Writers here, but I digress. I digress. Mira, yeah, is a human female bounty hunter. She is from I think it just says that she's from like an outer rim planet, but her planet was captured, taken down by the Mandalorians. So Mira actually became like an enslaved like servants to the Mandalorians before they finally decided that she was a okay and decided to teach her the ways of the Mandalorians. So she had kind of that knowledge. But then bad news when the mass shadow generator goes off and it kills her new Mandalorian family. Mira gets displaced. She was only 14 years old, had to go to Nar Shaddaa, live in the refugee sector, and do what she needed to do to survive. And that's how she ended up becoming a bounty hunter, and that's how she ended up on Nar Shaddaa.
Yeah, she kind of has a backstory that is kind of all over the place, but for me, like, checks out, uh, kind of compared to like some of the other companions' backstories that I'm like, wow, this is a serpentine trail that I don't know if it really checks out, but for me, like, Mira's definitely does.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems, all kinds of plausible, and I think that she represents really then, in kind of that displacement of what happened at the end of the mass shadow generator as, kind of a critical part of the story. So, last week we had a couple of characters that were pretty thin. I think that Mira has a little bit more of an interesting story, and that's why I think is kind of good to start with her and get hers out of the way because Hanhar really is a character that relies on Mira. She's she's basically his whole sort of deal, right? He's kind of you know doggedly pursuing how much he hates her through the whole thing. So I don't know. His story to me is a little less interesting, but I think that Mira is a really good kind of character study, and she, like I said, is on Nar Shaddaa and gets hired by one of the Jedi Masters there, Zez Kyle, to basically find Meetra Surik and to watch over Meetra Surik as we're spending our time on Nar Shaddaa trying to get to the bottom of these missing Jedi.
Yeah, and it's cool that she kind of has a force potential, and it kind of she was unknowingly aided by the force to become a better bounty hunter, even though she's not very violent. Like Kreia said, like she was not born to be a predator, despite her true father and the life she lived within the shadow of Nar Shaddaa. Like she's a very good person. Like she's street smart, but she has a good soul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. She doesn't seem really cut out for the bounty hunting life, although she is, by all accounts, pretty skilled at doing it. She's not able to, she doesn't want to kill any of the people that she's pursuing, and that's, ultimately how she gets tied forever to Hanharr, right? So we'll talk a little bit about his story and how he gets put in the position to pursue her in the first place. But, when given the option to end Hanhar's life, she spares it, and therefore creating this life debt that Hanharr has to respect and adhere to as we go through as we go through their stories. So they're kind of intrinsically linked in that sense, and that's kind of flip sides of the coin here. Obviously, is we're picking up Mira if we're light side or neutral on our playthrough.
Yeah, if only therapy existed in Star Wars, which is maybe like maybe a theme of KOTOR and Star Wars in general, but um
Yeah.
maybe this could have helped them have a third party to be like, you don't need to feel like you owe her a Wookiee life debt if you don't want to, and like maybe just like you guys stay on separate sides of Nar Shaddaa and stuff like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And, we talked a little bit about kind of the politics of KOTOR. We did a whole episode about that. Cassia, you might remember the episode number for that. But I think that Mira kind of
109.
represents that as well. 109. See, there you go. I knew it. She kind of represents that same kind of thing as well. If you look at her from the stance of kind of how she's having to go through life, what she's having to do to survive as, a displaced refugee, and kind of the political ramifications of, the mass shadow generator going off and, displacing a bunch of people in the galaxy. What does that mean for the galaxy? And, very kind of a politically driven sentiment here in our game, and, a game that doesn't quite get into it in the same depth as the original KOTOR, I don't think, at least. But I think
Hmm.
that this is kind of an interesting aspect of her story.
Yeah, like she was a refugee like twice over. Like, yeah. I guess originally was she, who knows, like, because like Kreia is like, despite her true father, like, I wonder who's her daddy, you know? Like,
Mm. Mm-hmm,
is
mm-hmm.
it Malik? Is it Canderous? Was it a Mandalorian? Was it a Jedi? Like, we do not know. That would be so interesting. But she, it sounds like she was probably like, kind of like the handmaiden, like the Mandalorian War, kind of like she exists because of it, was displaced, then adopted by the Mandalorians, and then lost the Mandalorians, and then had to go to Nar Shaddaa. And we covered Nar Shaddaa in one of our episodes, um, and just kind of said like how it's where all the refugees like displaced by this war go, and she kind of makes her home there, and she works there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting place, and yeah, it kind of breeds this criminal element that Mira's having to navigate through the story. Up until the point that we meet up with her when we go to Nar Shaddaa. So, Cassie, I guess let's talk about Mira's kind of arc overall. We talked a little bit about her backstory, who she was, where she came from, how she got to Nar Shaddaa, but kind of the events of Knights of the Old Republic too. How would you describe Mira's own character journey?
I guess it's that she ends up leaving Nar Shaddaa with the exile. Um, and then learns that she has the Force and kind of learns how to help people with that, and then Malicor happens, and we get to learn that she will one day die in Krea's monologue. So,
That's right. Krea's ultimate monologue at the end that tells us where everyone's going at the end of the game. Yeah, I think she does have kind of a pretty decent character journey here. As she's tasked with watching over Meetra Surik and then joins up with us. I think she's kind of able to to kind of separate, the bad things that have happened in her life, because it seems like by all accounts, Mira is, despite being a bounty hunter, a pretty peaceful person, really is trying to, not do any harm, not, killing any of the bounties that she's hunting down. It seems like she's, very much for giving, second chances and trying to see the good in things. And I think that, we kind of see that play out through the course of our story as she starts to explore, now that she's off of Nar Shaddaa, she's been tasked with kind of a greater purpose, to be able to pursue her own kind of peaceful life. And I think that, that's one of the end results of Krea's there. Monologue there is that she's able to live a life of peace, after the events. So I think that's nice, and a pretty nice little a character journey for a character who we don't get to spend as much time as Atten or Visas or Krea, but it's still a nice little character story for Mira here.
yeah, I would say some characters like Krea, Atten, and Visas, I would say probably have the most story to deal with. I would say some like Handmaiden and the Disciple like are kind of at the bottom. I would say like Mira is more in the middle. I would say her origin and like where we meet her are the most fleshed out, kind of not like her end as much, but it is satisfactory and Force helping if we ever got an adaptation, like in a textbook, like that would be intriguing to see like her character journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It would be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to get more of Mira's stories both before and after the events. To look at more of her character journey. But Knights of the Old Republic 2 is Meetra Surik's story after all. So, what kind of part of Meetra Surik's story do you think that Mira represents, or what part of her atonement story do you think that she plays?
Um, Maybe Nar Shaddaa is kind of like the balance of KOTOR 2, like kind of like it can go either way,
Mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and it depends like how your character is aligned, like what character you get, like because the exile has had a rough, past, and they could kind of let it define them, like Mira and Hanharr both had rough pasts as well. Hanharr probably took it negatively, and Mira is trying to take it positively. That's my interpretation. And maybe Mira is a reflection of the exile trying to um, fix things, or at least try to do the right thing. And uh, I mean, Mira was also affected by the war. Like everyone in the game is affected by the war. It seems like Mira is trying to make the most out of her situation. And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem like she really blames people. So maybe that reminds the exile like a lot of stuff has happened. A lot of it is the fault of me activating the mass shadow generator and going to war. So how to make peace with the past, I guess. That's my interpretation. What's yours?
Yeah, I think that that's kind of some really good observations. I like the thinking that kind of the pulse of Nar Shaddaa is the pulse of the entire galaxy. I think that that's a really interesting way to look at it. For me, I think that Mira kind of represents it's obviously it's the failings of Meetra Surik, but converse to like Visa Samar, who's kind of more of an intimate look, something that happened personally to Visa Samar, and maybe kind of happened to the force of the galaxy. I think Mira represents what happened to the regular people of the galaxy, to what happened to the galaxy when that went off, right? It wasn't just a weapon that it killed and destroyed Mandalorians and Sith and Jedi. It affected a lot of just regular people. So I think that she's kind of that representation of this war you were fighting between these factions had greater ramifications beyond your enemy across the way there. It also had all of these other effects, and certainly you're seeing that as you go to Nar Shaddaa, which we talked about a little bit more in that episode there. So yeah, I think that Mira is a really interesting character. She's certainly the one that I've spent more time with, because playing a dark side playthrough is a bummer for me, so not into that much.
Yeah.
So Hanharr I never really got to spend too much time with. Now if you do play the dark side ending, apparently Mira gets killed by Hanharr as Kreia convinces him that that's a-okay, and that's kind of the endings, right? She either ends up happy and living a life of peace, or she ends up killed by this other bounty hunter by the name of Hanharr, the Wookiee bounty hunter. So why don't we talk about him a little bit?
Uh, one one question
Oh yeah.
before we kind of dive into all things Hanhar. Do you think like Hanhar finally killing Mira in the end of the dark side ending, does that free him, or what do you think happens?
No, because I mean, I think that he's now he's under a life debt to Kreia, and potentially the Meetra Surik then as well, right? If you're um,
Yeah.
playing that route. So no, I think really Hanhar ultimately becomes just kind of a pawn of this system that he's believing in. So kind of a tale of his being trapped by his own belief structure and being manipulated by people who know how to manipulate it and use that against him and use him as sort of their own little personal giant raging Wookiee super weapon.
Yeah. It is interesting, the Wiki life debt, like how much of that is cultural, how much of it like Hanhar subscribes to because he really hates it. It's so interesting. But yeah, like what you say is like even if he kills Mira, he'll never be free. He'll probably just uh continue the cycle. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting, and that is actually one of the things I wanted to bring up when we talked about Hanhar here. So, who is Hanhar? As I said, he's a Wookiee. He's operating there on Nar Shaddaa, which is where bounty hunters go to operate, pretty much. And the rumor on the street is that he killed his entire Wookiee clan, and I guess that he did that. Hanhar was fascinated by the Shadowlands, was kind of an outcast, and was down there living in them. And he saw Zerka was coming in, so he decided to kill his clan instead of seeing his clan enslaved. Bad news for Hanhar. He was enslaved himself by Zerka, but got the upper hand there, killed his captors, and ended up free on Nar Shaddaa to go and work as a bounty hunter. So my question then, to tie that back to what you just asked me, Cassia, is it is kind of strange that Hanhar is so honorable on this life debt, right? Because he is living in the Shadowlands, which seemed to be a big no-no. He killed his clan, which certainly was a big no-no, and he's kind of turned his back on all of the other Wookiee customs, at least a bunch of the ones that we know of. So I think it's a little strange that he's so steadfast in honoring this one.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of wonder like because we've discussed the Wookiee culture uh from KOTOR in some depth. I just kind of wonder what some people think about KOTOR 2 and Hanhar. Like, what does Hanhar kind of represent? Like, is he just kind of the outcast and has nowhere to go? Um, so it's just like fascinating to me because one thing that I found very interesting is like Hanhar is the only companion in the game that the player gains influence with, like uh through mostly like negative reinforcement and insulting at the Wookiee. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's just interesting that it's like you put him down in like that kind of like negative reinforcement, like uh kind of gets him more committed to the exile, which is interesting because it's not healthy.
Yeah, it's definitely not healthy. Yeah, it is interesting, and like you said, he's the only character that you can kind of manipulate in that way, and yeah, I think that it is kind of a great manipulation. Here, as you know, Hanharr is kind of playing through the game. So I talked a little bit about how he was captured by Zerka, killed them on way to Nar Shaddaa, and then he got there and was able to go about his business and becomes a bounty hunter. He was hired to kill Mira by someone. But there was an explosion, and Hanharr was injured. Asked Mira to kill him instead, but she spared his life, so therefore owes her a life debt, which he really, really is not a big fan of. Really, really wants to kill Mira, but can't ever quite bring himself to do it. Apparently, they have a bunch of run-ins where he is near inches away from ending her life, but he's not able to get over that life debt that he owes her. So I think that that's pretty interesting from the fact that these two characters who we don't really interact with, both of them on board the Ebon Hawk are so intrinsically tied. Through this life debt, and how important their stories are to one another, in that way.
One question I have for you is even though like Hanharr couldn't become a dark Wookiee Jedi, do you think that he had Force potential?
I don't know. That's hard to say. Yeah, the original intent was that he was going to be able to be force sensitive before that got shot down by Lucasfilm at the time. So yeah, that's interesting to think of. Even if that's not necessarily explorable in the game, is that still something that you see? I don't know, and quite honestly, never playing a dark side playthrough, I'm not as familiar with kind of the intricacies of his dialogue options and things like that. So I couldn't really say for sure, but just kind of what I know about Hanharr and the aspects of the game that I have played and what you get to see and experience within like the cut content, I would think no, he seems kind of weak-minded in that sense to me, but I don't know. What do you think, Hasia?
I would say like a dark-sided exile wouldn't care. Like, should we give this like Wookiee who seems to be uh pursuing dark things, very unhealthily, like I don't think the exile would have qualms about making Hanharr a Jedi if or I guess not a Jedi, a Sith, you know. I think like the exile, like if Hanharr had Force potential, a dark exile would make Hanharr a Sith, or a dark Jedi, whatever we want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think Hanharr had Force potential, but it would be interesting if they ever said like, no, he did. So
Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting to go back and kind of have those conversations, and I kind of wonder, kind of the same as we've spoken with about a couple of the other characters. Then Hanhar's story becomes a little thin, and I wonder if it's because they didn't have time to revisit any of that. They'd kind of put their eggs in that basket, and then got changed. So maybe there was a little bit more of a backstory or a future story for Hanharr. So that would be really interesting to look at. And in terms of Dark Jedi or Fallen Jedi kind of thing. When I look at Meetra Surik as the character, as the hero heroine of Knights of the Old Republic 2, I think that they play kind of an interesting role in that story development. So Hanharr joins, right, if we're going down a dark side path. So I think that he's just kind of a personifies basically the worst of us, making the worst decisions, and being insatiable lust for power and misery. So I think he just represents that dark side of us. Especially if you're playing a dark side path. What about you? Do you see any sort of key components of Meetra Surik's story that Hanharr is filling in there, or maybe on the flip side of that, if you're playing a light side, do you see any potential for Hanharr playing a role in Meetra Surik's story?
I think maybe as a reminder, not to like give in to darker impulses. Um, like for light-sided exile, I think they kind of see them as a warning and like um kind of like to have a healthy light-sided mindset. In a dark-sided playthrough, I kind of don't really know how Hanhar's life kind of intersects with the Mandalorian War and the Mesh Shadow Generator as much,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe that was cut. But um, I think like a dark exile would have no qualms about like kind of just like making Hanhar a slave, like using him uh like for that purpose. And it's not good. So choose the light side.
Choose the light side. Yeah, yeah. It is kind of interesting because Hanharr could almost be seen as like this cautionary tale type of a figure, but you only are interacting with them if you're already not heeding those cautions. So I don't know. So maybe some missed opportunity there. Maybe his story becomes more important, I think, to us if we're playing light side character, even though he's technically not in the party, and Mira is in that circumstances. So we get through Knights of the Old Republic 2. What happens to this Wookiee companion? Apparently Mira can kill him, so that's an option. So I guess you can go that way. Hanharr can go back to Kashyyyk. You go down this dark side path, and Hanharr returns to Kashyyyk to basically take over. Still a grumpy guy, still not in a good mood, still just wants to kill and destroy everything. But what I think is interesting here about this, and this was, I guess, cut. It wasn't even part of like the cut content. It was just an idea, as far as I know, that was floated out there, and eventually was just cut from the game completely. But apparently there was a scenario where Hanharr rescues Meetra Surik on Malachar 5, sacrificing himself kind of in the process. And I think that is more interesting. It gives a little bit more of a clear character journey to Hanharr, to sacrifice. We love Loving Atonement, but Hanharr, by all accounts, is a pretty bad dude, and I think that gives his story a little bit more of a fulfilling conclusion, kind of coming full circle from all of the bad things that he's done to be able to save the companions and thus save the galaxy.
Yeah, I mean, Hanhar is someone like uh some bad things have happened to, but he literally killed his tribe first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what set him on his path, and he doesn't really seem to have any self-reflection or feel sorry for it. So if there was to be a death in KOTOR 2, like maybe it would be fitting if it were him. Or would it be more interesting if he has to live with himself for the rest of his life? Like, what do you think?
If him and Mira had to live together, they had to get like a duplex on Nar Shaddaa and just hang out for the rest of the time.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I don't know what's more interesting. I do, like I said, I like kind of the aspect of Hanharr, who has been very selfish and kind of self-fulfilling in the story, doing something sacrificial. I think that is kind of interesting, but yeah, having to atone in another way. But it's hard to say, right? Because in the dark side ending, he literally goes back to his home planet and just takes over and keeps living his life as he had been. So yeah, I don't know. Thinking of a way where he could atone properly is pretty tricky, I think. But yeah, I suppose that there's definitely a place for that. Maybe it's just they talk it over. They put on a pot of calf and they sit down, him and Mira, and they just say, "Listen, you don't have to have this life debt to me. Quit being so negative all the time. We can just be pals, or we can go on our separate ways, and let's let bygones be bygones and move on with our life." That's what I think. I think maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah. It's funny because when you mentioned like Mira and Hanharr like having to live in the same duplex, it brought to mind like Tom and Jerry and the
Yeah.
cartoon, or I guess comic like Spy versus Spy. It's a wordless comic strip published in Mad Magazine, but it kind of just reminds me of that. Like, this will never happen, but imagine if there were like a cartoon and it's like Mira and Hanharr, like quote unquote, resolving their differences, um, or not really doing it through comic mayhem. Like, that would be funny.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, they're definitely an interesting pair for sure. And it's the complete opposites of our Wookiee and companion story that we get in Knights of the Old Republic 1, right, between Big Z and Mission. So I've got a question here from Discord from impeccably dressed Nicola. Says very simply, Hanharr and Mira versus Big Z and Mission, Terrace dueling arena. Who you got? Who do you have, Cassia? Who is going to win that duel?
I think that Mira and Hanharr are more more like capable fighters, but they're not united, and Hanharr would probably be trying to kill Mira. So
Mm-hmm.
Mission and Big Z are friends, you know. Um, they wouldn't be trying to sabotage one another. They would be united. So even though like they might not be like as ruthless or proficient, with weapons as like the bounty hunters Hanharr and Mira, I think they would win because they're united. Um, but yeah, it would be interesting to see like what would happen if that pair ever met, like, or even just like Hanharr and Big Z, because Big Z is like a nice teddy bear with red suspenders. And how would you describe Hanharr?
Yeah, Hanharr is a big, lovable Wookiee. Our pal has some red suspenders and is going to do anything to make sure that everyone is okay and having a good time. We love Big Z. Hanharr, on the other hand, is a big giant jerk. Is going to make sure everyone has a bad time. Probably going to fight with you for no reason at all. Even if he has life out to you, he's still going to fight you. So, my answer to this question is Hanharr and Mira on paper should absolutely wipe the floor with Big Z and Mission, but as you said, Hanharr is going to be too busy trying to figure out if he can actually kill Mira or not. Mira is too nice; she's not going to take out Big Z or Mission. So Mission and Big Z are going to use that time to figure out how to get out of the dueling arena and go on with their lives, back on Kashyyyk, having a good time. So that is my answer there. I don't know if that is a satisfactory answer, but that's how I see it, because I don't want Big Z and Mission to have to fight these two. That seems like a bad time.
Yeah. So hope Mission and Big Z are doing well. It would have been nice to have them mentioned in KOTOR 2, but alas.
Alas, no mentions there. And since I got my Discord pulled up here, I've got some comments here from Nelson, who I think is on the Hero's Journey podcast Discord. So actually chimed in on our last episode too. So thanks, Nelson. Let's see. This is all stuff he's remembering from a while ago, so maybe not 100% accurate. That being said, I liked Mira because she let you not set off mines. Very useful, actually. She can collect all the mines and doesn't blow them up. That's great. I also liked that it fulfilled the rogue role in the party. So we've got some pie suggestions here too, so we're going to get to that in a second. But for pie for Mira, I would say something like strawberry rhubarb. The tartness from the rhubarb is kind of her abrasive public persona, but she's actually kind, as shown by her saving Hanharr, and that would be the sweetness of the strawberries. So strawberry rhubarb pie, there for Mira. I like that. And Nelson says for Hanharr, he was more of a barbarian archetype, and since both my light side and dark side playthroughs were melee based, I didn't use him much. For desserts, something with a bitter ingredient like dark chocolate or coffee, so like a coffee custard pie. Now, coffee custard pie does sound delicious. But yeah, bitter, because Hanharr is bitter. Agreed.
That's an interesting pie take.
It is
I
an
like
interesting
it.
pie take. That sounds
Yeah.
really good. I'm into this coffee custard pie. I'm not grumpy like Hanharr though, but I think it still sounds delicious. So.
Yeah. Um, those are some good points about Mira and Hanhar. So, um, I guess do we have another
I have one more comment here. It looks like it is from our friend Marcus, who's been on the podcast several times. Is Jolie Bindo and Holo Chronicles of a Jedi. So make sure you check that out. I think a new season is coming our way anytime now. He just has some pie recommendations. He says Mira is going to go for some raspberry pie, and Hanhar is going to go for a meat pie. And that's probably true. That's probably true. That's what he's going to go for.
mhm. And then I had some listener feedback. So let me just pull this up. Marius wonders, what about an expose on Hanhar's years as a model for fashionable furs? What do you think about that?
Fashionable furs. Yeah, he's got the two black bandoliers there going on. Chewbacca only has the one. Hanhar has two. He doubled it up, so that's pretty fashionable, I think. Not quite as bright and vibrant as Big Z's red suspenders, but yeah, I think Hanhar looks pretty good with the Wookiee fashion. What do you think?
Yeah, everything goes with black, so sometimes you need to make ends meet. So good for Hanhar for being an entrepreneur. Chewie, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm so sorry if I do not. Like, it's just me being an ignorant person. But Shui says, I really liked Mira's storyline, but like the overall game, I wish it had had a more satisfactory conclusion. Maybe we should make that, like a bumper sticker for KOTOR 2.
That's right.
But and then I followed up with, how would you have wanted her arc to go?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and
And
that's a good question because we actually didn't really cover that too much. We talked a little bit about what, kind of what did, allegedly happen according to Kreia and kind of the way that played out. But yeah, that is interesting. What do you think would have been a satisfactory conclusion for Mira? We talked about ways that, Hanhar could have atoned, but. What do you think Mira deserves? I mean, she's had a rough go of it, right? Lost her family, and then captured and basically forced into a new family. So you don't really know how that played out, if that was amicable in any sort of way, how she really feels about that. Again, yeah, some therapy would have been handy for a lot of these characters for sure. But what do you think, Cassie? What do you think would have been a fitting conclusion for Mira here at the end of the game?
Mira's a very hopeful character, and Jedi, I mean, in KOTOR 2, Jedi are kind of seen as like not as that great, but I think like the exile kind of empowers her companions to be the best versions of themselves and Jedi. So I kind of see Mira becoming the ultimate beacon of hope, kind of like the end of The Last Jedi episode 8, like the ultimate beacon of hope becoming a Jedi for Mira, and maybe she could lead the refugees from the Mandalorian War and help them, all over the galaxy, but it would be nice for her to return to Nar Shaddaa at some point. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. She could do something in some sort of role where she's able to give guidance and counseling to other potential refugees or other displaced kids and things like that she would have had stuff in common with. I think that a character like Mira probably would have found that ultimately very fulfilling and cathartic to be able to use all of the pain and unsettling parts of her own life to to help others and be a beacon of hope, as you said there, Cassia. So yeah, I think something good and positive like that would have been really great for a character like Mira. And I don't know, maybe once we wrap up all this KOTOR 2 stuff, maybe we'll just have to do our own KOTOR 2.5 and make sure that everyone has a fulfilling conclusion.
Yeah, we'll find a good title for it, kind of like that Hamlet spoof, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And Shui also said her arc itself was fine, but I would have liked a little more of a conclusion to her arc rather than just the final narration by Kreia. And I mean, same, you know? So,
Same, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to add to that. Yeah, for sure. It's it's fine to to have her kind of summarize the paths of everyone. It would have been interesting had she, Kreia had told us, what her vision was for everyone's future, and then have gotten to see like what the actual future of these characters would have been. That could have been like an interesting take on the way that end game played out a little bit more. But yeah, I definitely would like to have seen further, more fulfilling conclusions for these stories and these characters.
yeah. And then I asked Dennis about his thoughts on Mira and Hanharr, and he responded, I was just astounded when I realized that they'd give you a different character depending on whether or not you were dark or light side. And then he continued and said, Mira, I feel, would love cherry pie, but insists that it be made from the canned cherries instead of fresh ones. Uh,
Okay.
Hanharr needs some sort of meat pie, like mincemeat or something, shepherd's pie maybe.
Mm, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, those are good pie options. And it is interesting that based on how you're playing the game, right? We get now we're seeing quite a few video games that are kind of changing the story and the narrative and what happens to you depending on how you're playing the game. So for this to have done it as well as it did back then, especially with the rushed game cycle, what I think would have been maybe more interesting, though, and we hit on this a little bit as we were talking about the characters. I think if you would have been playing a dark side playthrough, maybe having Mira come into your party, and if you're playing a light side playthrough, having Hanharr come into your party, because then they're more opposites of the way you're playing the game. And you could have played off of that a little bit more. I think that something like that would have been interesting. But yeah, I think it is really neat. Kind of game feature that based on how you were playing the game, really depended or really affected who was going to come into your party.
Yeah, that is a good idea you have. Like, what if someone challenges your position rather than kind of reinforces it? Or like, what if Mira and Hanharr joined you at different times, Or
Mm-hmm.
what if you had to like they were on to Ebon Hawk at the same time and like the exile is like, okay, it's been 3 minutes, but that's been way too long. So you're gonna leave, seek therapy, and come back when you've handled that. So yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, instead of saying, "Hey, you're playing the game like a jerk. Here's a jerky Wookiee companion for you." To challenge you a little bit. That would have been an interesting way to see that out, I think.
Yeah. Um, it is interesting that the writers kind of thought about like, oh, if it's light or dark side, you get different characters, If you're male or female, you get different characters, and um, some games do that, but it would be more interesting, I think, like to see some Star Wars games start to do that, like in this age of video games we're in. But maybe we'll see that again in the future. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
So, I think that was was that all the questions we had from
that's
Discord,
all the
Cassia?
feedback we got, but we not done because we have to choose what kind of pie would Mira and Hanharr have.
That's right. Yeah. What kind of pie for Mira and Hanharr this week? So Hanharr, yeah, is going to be right in line with what Dennis was saying. I had a shepherd's pie for Hanharr, except it's not cooked at all. It's just raw
Ooh.
and probably spoiled because that is how Hanharr lives his life. He is just all about the menace and the killing and the being mean and no good all the time. So I'm going to go with a shepherd's pie, uncooked though for Hanharr. And for Mira. I don't know. Mira seems pretty optimistic, pretty hopeful, and it seems like she, despite the bad things that have happened to her, still seems like she is a really good person. So I'm going to say for Mira, she's going to go up to the diner. She's going to look at the pie counter and she's going to get whatever she wants. And that's going to be something delicious like a chocolate silk pie. That sounds good and luxurious, and she deserves it for all the bad things that have happened to her.
Yeah, I totally see Hanhar having a shepherd's pie as well. I would have it cooked if it were given to him because I'm not disgusting. But, like he'd probably be like, "Ugh, I'm resentful because this pie is cooked and I don't want it cooked." But he would say that in Wookiee language, not like
Mm-hmm.
like basic. But for Mira, like um I feel like some people read my mind, but like I was like, it would probably be strawberry or cherry pie, but like let's be honest, like cherry pie is more readily available, it seems. And she has
Mm-hmm.
red hair.
Yep.
Um, and it's sweet, So I kind of think like she'd have cherry pie. So yeah, but one question I have for you is who do you think Mira's true father is?
Oh man, that is a tricky one. I don't know because I don't think. Let's see. Mira is very skilled. She knows all of the Mandalorian ways. She is good with explosives. Oh man, I don't know. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was. I don't think it was a Jedi. Maybe she had. I don't know. That is the million dollar question. What do you think? I'm going to pass. I'm going to skip myself. Who do you think Mira's father is?
I think that it would either be Mandalore the Ultimate, who was killed by Revan, or it was Canderous,
Mm.
which would be interesting because then potentially like you have like Kreia meeting the Handmaiden, and there's some speculation that Kreia is the Handmaiden's mom. Even though I'm like, when was she of childbearing age last? Like good for her. Whatever. The Force works in mysterious ways,
That's right.
and we
That's
are
right.
not to understand them. But yeah, and then like Canderous could have maybe had Mira as his daughter. Like
Mm.
that would have
Okay.
been. Star Wars is all about family being reconnected and it ruining the galaxy for everyone else. But
That's right.
um,
That's right. It is all connected. No, I like yeah, Mandalore being her father. Demolitions, good at demolitions. That makes a lot of sense. And then I just imagine, Canderous, when he comes on board the Ebon Hawk and Kreia, and they just start giving each other kind of like a side eye, like they know that these are their kids, but don't want to say anything because you don't want it to be awkward there. So yeah,
yeah,
I don't know.
what happens in the Mandalorian Wars stays in the Mandalorian Wars. Unless it's like the mass shadow generator, then it like doesn't stay in the Mandalorian Wars and it impacts the galaxy for generations to come. But also, if it were a Jedi, it would be totally lame if her dad was Darth Revan. And
Mm-hmm,
if it
hmm.
had to be a Jedi, Malik is more interesting, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think Malik would be more interesting, because we learned about Revan's kids in the Revan novel. So
Yeah. So, did you have anything uh, else to that you wanted to say about Mira and Hanhar?
No, I think that that is going to wrap it up for Mira and Hanharr. A couple of interesting characters with some interesting journeys and a little bit more implications, I think, on our characters here this time around than our characters last week might have had. So let us know what you think about these two characters. Let us know if you're doing light side or dark side playthroughs, who you like to get into your party, and what kind of pie Hanharr and Mira are having when they go and sit down, have their coffee, and talk over why they should just learn to get along. Let us know all that stuff in the comments or on social medias, and yeah, we'll be back next time to talk about a couple more of our KOTOR 2 companions.
Yep. All right. And may the force be with you always.